Hello, algebra students. We're taking a look at 4.5, multiplying polynomials by monomials. And we're going to start with a little warm-up with a monomial times a binomial. This is really just a review of your distributive property. So you want to make sure you're multiplying the negative 3 by both terms in parentheses. So we have the negative 3 times 4, which gives us negative 12. And then our negative times a negative makes that a positive, and that would be 3 times 5x would be 15x. So hopefully able to get that. And then a reminder about like terms, that we can only add or subtract like terms. So with our second polynomial here, let's take a look at dealing with the subtraction. Since we are subtracting the whole second portion, I'm going to make sure I get that subtraction applied to both terms that were inside parentheses. And then I want to focus on my like terms. I can only add or subtract like terms. So same variable to the same power with same variable to the same power. So I have a like terms in the 2x and the negative x, and I have like terms in the negative 8y and the 3y. So 2x minus x is going to give me 1x. And then the negative 8y plus 3y gives me minus 5y, or plus negative 5y. Now, if you still have questions about those two warm-ups, please make sure you take them to your algebra teacher. So again, just a reminder that when we multiply monomials, we use the distributive property. So for our example here, we want to make sure that we multiply the x times both terms in parentheses. So that's like taking 2x times x plus 1 times x. And so our 2 times x would be simplified to 2x squared plus 1x, or we could just write that as x. Looking at the next example, we have our negative 2x squared, and we want to make sure, again, that we're distributing to each term. And so we have negative 2x squared times 3x squared plus the negative 2x squared times negative 4xy plus the negative 2x squared times y squared. Now you don't have to write that out each time. You could do that multiplication in your head. You want to make sure you're sharing that negative 2x squared with every term in parentheses. So we can simplify that. And the negative 2x squared times 3x squared is going to give us a negative 6x to the 4th. Remember, when you're multiplying, you're adding the exponents, plus we have the negative 2x squared times negative 4xy. That's going to give us a positive 8x to the 3rd y, plus we have negative 2x squared times y squared, and that just gives us a negative 2x squared y squared. Now we would want to look back through and see if we have any like terms with same letters to the same power. And since we don't, we can just leave that go as it is simplified. So for this next part, we're going to take this same idea about distributing and combining like terms and apply it in the setting of an equation. So I want to make sure I'm distributing. So I'll go through and do that. So my m times 2 would give me 2m. And then we have minus, and the m times 5m or negative 5m would be negative 5m squared plus, I have 5m squared, and then 5 times the negative 2 would give me negative 10, and we have equals 0. Now if you look, you've got like terms here, and they are opposite like terms, so they're going to cancel out, and I end up with 2m minus 10 is equal to 0, and that is an equation we can solve by adding 10 to both sides. And dividing by 2. And we get m is equal to 5. So just kind of applying what we're practicing to what we already know about solving equations. So as we get things that are more complicated, it's going to be easier to communicate with each other if we're kind of speaking the same language or arranging things the same way. So a polynomial mathematically is normally put in ascending or descending order. So what that means is that if it's going from ascending order, it means it's going up. So that means you're going from lesser to greater exponents. If it's in descending order, you're going from greater exponents to lesser exponents. So for this following one, we're going to put the polynomial into descending order. So that means we are going from the greater exponents to the lesser exponents. So we're just rearranging the terms. And so our highest or our greatest exponent is the x to the 4th. So we put that first. And then we look for the next one. The next lower, or the next highest one, would be negative 3x squared. And then we have an exponent of 1 there with the plus 8x. And then we have no variable term at all with a power, and the constant goes last. So it can get a little confusing when you've got more than one variable. We typically deal with the variable that's first in alphabetical order first. So we'll focus on the x's and their powers. And so we'll look for the x with the highest power, or the term with the x to the highest power. And that is this term here. So that negative 6 coefficient term will go first because x comes before y in the alphabet. And if we're going in descending order, we want the x with the highest power first. Then we'll continue to look for the powers of x in descending order. So the next term would be the x squared term. And then our x to the first. And then our term with no x at all. So the next couple we're going to practice putting into ascending order, so that's going from lesser variable powers to, or lesser exponents to greater exponents. And so again, we're looking at exponents of a here, and first going from lesser to greater. Then with no exponent there, or an exponent of 1, we have our constants first, so that would be negative 3 is their first term. Then we look at the powers of a, and our lowest power of a is 1, so that's plus 2a. And then we have a squared, so minus a squared would be next. And then we have the a to the third, so plus 5a to the third. So again, when we have more than one variable, we want to look at variables in alphabetical order. So we're going to consider the x before the y, and we're going in ascending order. And so we're looking at, what are the powers of x? And if we're going in ascending order, then the constant is going to go first. So we have our 7. and then looking for the lowest power of x, so the next one would be plus 4xy, and then the next lower power of x would be x squared, and so minus 2x squared y to the third, and then the next power of x would be x to the third, so plus x to the third y squared. So we showed you both orders, descending and ascending, just because mathematical language kind of decides on either one of those as acceptable. So just a few concluding ideas in that when you are looking at ascending or descending, those constant terms are always either first or last, depending on whether you're going in ascending or descending orders. We want to order the terms in ascending or descending order, and the variables in alphabetical order. So ordering the terms in either ascending or descending order in order to be kind of correct mathematical language. Okay, and then approach the variables in alphabetical order. So approach your variables alphabetically. Now, because we want a common language for your algebra class, for this algebra class, we are going to go with descending order. Now, it's going to make things easier to compare when you do homework, when you do classwork assignments, and your teacher's checking for tests or quizzes as well. If you put them in descending order, then it's going to be easier for everybody just having that common language. So again, please stick for this class to descending order, and then it's just going to depend on what classes you have in the future, what your teacher would prefer. Please take all your questions to your algebra teacher.